All Things Data podcast. In the spirit of Daniel Kahneman, Peter Diamandis, and Google Moonshots, brings together leading data scientists, technologists, business model experts, and futurists to discuss how to utilize, harness, and deploy data science and data-driven strategies to enable digital transformation. The hosts are Dr. Manjeet Rege, Associate Professor of Data Science, and Dan Yarmala, Director of Business Development of IoT and Data Science. The podcast is produced by the Graduate Programs of Software of the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota.
We'd like to introduce Dr. Timothy Chou. Dr. Chou started his career in Silicon Valley as one of the first Kleiner Perkins startups, Tandem Computers. Since then, he's been lucky enough to be part of some of the most successful and, as he says, not so successful startups today, as the chairman of the Alchemist Accelerator, which invests in early-stage industrial IoT companies. Tim has also worked at large companies, including Oracle, where he was the president of the Oracle On Demand for 6 years. This was the foundation for Oracle's multi-billion-dollar cloud business. At the same time, he was one of only 3 people to ever hold the title of president at Oracle. Today, he consults for Fortune 500 companies and serves as the member of board of directors for 2 public companies, Blackbaud and Teradata. While he was at Oracle, he authored his first landmark book, The End of Software, which foretold the rise of SaaS applications and featured 3 early-stage startups, Salesforce, NetSuite, and VMware. More recently, he launched a new book, Precision Principles and Practices and Solutions for the Internet of Things, and that's had international acclaim. In parallel with his commercial career, he's also taught at Stanford University for over 30 years. For 15 of those years, he taught core computer science and only took a break because he had to fly for Bali for a sales kickoff meeting and get back within 36 hours to teach a class. After leaving Oracle, he went back to Stanford and started the first class on cloud computing. His guest lecturers have included the CEO of Salesforce, Vice Chairman of General Electric, and the CTO of Amazon. Dr. Tim Chou has lectured at over 25 universities around the world and delivered keynote speeches on all 6 continents. Please join me in welcoming him. Welcome, Dr. Chou.
Thank you for such a great introduction.
So, Tim, first of all, thank you for joining us. Let me start off by asking, while you were at Oracle, you did some great work in the SaaS model, that is software as a service. So can you talk about how enterprise software over the years has evolved from, being on-premise to software as a service, and what is the business value for that particular move?
Yeah, I think really the core of the book, The End of Software, was try to help people think about this. When you understand that the cost of software does not end with buying the software, licensing the software, whatever, and realize that the cost is really the cost of management of the software, so cost to manage security, availability, performance, and change. And then we developed this rule of thumb years ago. I believe it's probably even more true today. The cost to manage a traditional piece of software was 4 times the purchase price of the software per year. So if you think about that, in a 4-year time frame, you're spending 16 times the purchase price managing the software, right? And if you went, and it's still true today, if you go to most Fortune 500 IT shops, and all the humans that are in the IT shop are there to manage the performance, availability, and security of all the software they bought through all these years. And the fundamental shift of delivering software as a service, or as we are now saying also compute as a service, is really to realize that if I can standardize the environment, if I can standardize the processes for managing the security, availability, and performance of the software, then I can do that with automation. I can use computers to do this, not humans, which both fundamentally reduces the cost for doing this as well as improves the quality. And so I think, as with any shift in technology, the root of the shift is always in economics. And that was the fundamental shift in economics from classic on-premises enterprise software. Was an economic shift buried in the cost of managing that software.
Now, tightly coupled with that shift as well comes the question of security, right? Now, many a times companies tend to believe that my software, maybe on premise, is more secure as compared to not having anything on premise and me logging into a cloud onto somebody else's server, which in fact might be more secure compared to having it on premise. But you have that mental barrier a number of times. How does one overcome that, and how would you convince?
Oh well, I'll tell you, the very early days of running the on-demand business at Oracle, we used to have customers come and want to go visit the computers. And we even had one guy get up on the cage and shake the cage, right?
Mm-hmm.
We affectionately called these guys server huggers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know there's this kind of belief about this. And, I used to ask those guys, I said, do you have an online checking account? And they go, oh, yeah. And I said, well, can I ask you, have you ever seen the computers that your online checking account's on? Of course, the answer is no, right? So, yes, there's this kind of, we'll call it deep-seated belief that some people have about we'll call it the physical nature of control. But at the end of the day, I think if you start to realize that, that a supplier of, software, compute as a service is, very interested in making sure that that service is secure, because otherwise people aren't going to use it. And when they invest, they can invest across millions of people or hundreds of companies, and as opposed to you, who could only invest for one, you start to realize that, well, there's an economic advantage of doing this, which is also a result of spending more money in automation. So a simple example of this is, if you look at it, most of the breaches that have happened are software breaches. You take advantage of somebody not making sure that the latest security patches are put in place, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you go, well, why if I'm invested in creating a secure cloud service, why would I not build software which from the time a security patch is made available until it's placed into production is 49 minutes plus or minus 3 minutes? I can do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, the ability of we'll call it centralized organization who has a vested interest in applying automation to the problem will end up with, in fact, a more secure system than you could possibly do on a onesie basis.
So, in terms of IoT and security, where you have a number of devices now becoming smarter and getting online, be it light bulb or be it a refrigerator, or it could be a medical device, right? So now, sometimes that security breach could become pretty serious, like somebody hacking into my light bulb might not be that dangerous, but somebody hacking into a embedded device in the body could be a big issue.
Oh, I think if people were honest with themselves, the biggest holes in the whole internet right now are in things, not PCs and laptops and phones. I mean, the most famous example that everybody has heard of is how the Iranian centrifuges were breached, not with guns, but with software. And they came in through, PLCs, et cetera. And if you become a student of the software environments on things, and whether that's consumer things, as you just talked about, like cameras, all the way through, MRI scanners, tractors, gene sequencers, et cetera, you'll quite rapidly see that the software environments are just awful from the standpoint of security. They're very unsophisticated compared to what you see today on your laptop or your cell phone. And so there's a big gap to be jumped here. And I personally believe it's not a gap. You know, I've done a lot of work in the Internet of Things in the past 2 years. One of the things I observe to people is, you know, things are not people. Most of the technology we built up until now has been for the Internet of people, right? I mean, whether that's a CRM app or an e-commerce app or whatever, is to serve a human. Well, I go, well, but people aren't things. I mean, they're not.
Right.
You know, first of all, there's going to be way more things connected to the Internet. Second of all, right, those things can be connected a myriad of ways, not just Wi-Fi and 3G, 4G. These things talk much more frequently than you can ever type. I mean, you know, wind turbines can put 500 sensors worth of data out every second, right? And so when you fundamentally realize that things cannot be people, then you have to ask the question, why would the technology that we apply to the Internet of People work for the Internet of Things? And the trivial example of this is, well, today, most of us realize that, quote, IOP applications depend on the idea that we're going to change our password every 6 weeks. We're going to put a capital letter and exclamation point at the end. And I sit there and go, well, let's see, how are you going to make the tractor do that?
Right.
Right. And so we really are going to have to rethink, right, the fundamental security mechanisms for the world of IoT. And by the way, we also have the opportunity to do that because, as I said, today what you're seeing out there is relatively unsophisticated by our standards. So could I build the next generation of things using secure, kernels? Could I build it, basically using inherent blockchain technologies for authentication? Could I build it? Could I engineer security in from the beginning, which is, by the way, never happened in the world of Internet of People. We glommed it onto the PCs. We glommed it onto the cell phones. I think we have the opportunity to engineer it in from the beginning for the new world of the Internet of Things.
Yeah, that's what has me excited is employing blockchain technology for authentication. But there's other things too, right? I mean, when you talk about the SCADA or the PLC at the enterprise level, we can take some of the intelligence out of the control system and still be gathering quantitative data. And then that way, if it's breached, it's not hitting sensitive command and control. So plant intelligence comes in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I think what people have to start to realize that the machines themselves, I always tell people, what is the machine of the future, right? I mean, and I say it's a bunch of sensors, a bunch of actuators, a big computer in the middle with a lot of software. And if you want to see an early version of this, go buy a Tesla. You look at it and go, well, that car, every 30 to 60 days you get a new feature in it, right?
Yeah.
Well, nobody's ever thought of having a new feature in a car before, right?
Yeah.
That's a really foreign idea. Well, if you live in the world of software, you go, well, of course, that's not an obvious that you could do that. And I point out to people, they don't realize this. The 2016 Porsche Panamera had 2 million lines of code in it. The 2017 had 100 million lines of software in it.
Wow.
So, yeah. And so you start to think, well, these machines, I like to point out to people, if you look at a cell phone, abstractly, it's 12 different sensors, right? Accelerators, barometers, magnetometers, etc., connected to a big computer with a lot of storage on it, connected to 3 different networks. And if you took the fancy case off of it and the fancy screen, it probably cost about $50. Which leads to the question, why won't we see a cell phone inside every compressor, blood analyzer, gene sequencer, tractor, etc., right? We should see that level of sophistication in hardware and ultimately software as well machines. And I don't think people are thinking, obviously there are examples already, but I think a lot of people they haven't gotten there yet. But I'll tell you, the newest generation combine harvester that AGCO produces has 5 million lines of code in it. That's
so Tim,
of what will be true in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, Tim, speaking of industry verticals, which vertical do you think has moved quickly and made strides in IoT, and which has been the slowest so far?
Yeah, I have to say I ask myself this question all the time. I'll tell you, I've been looking at fundamentally 7 different verticals, and I've mostly been paying attention to the not consumer world, so I'm not paying much attention to Nest thermostats or light bulbs, as you just said. But if you look at power, construction, healthcare, transportation, oil and gas, buildings, and agriculture, right? I will not tell you I feel like any one of those areas is moving faster than any other. I will tell you there is one of the things that I think your listeners ought to think about is, why is GE running all this, all these ad campaigns? I mean, they're running ads on Saturday Night Live, right? Talking about it on the internet. Why, right? And I go, it doesn't take too long. If you look at their 2016 annual report, you will see that in today's GE, at $110 billion in revenue, they do $55 billion in products and $55 billion in service. And once you realize that service is in essence information transfer, information about how to maintain or optimize the performance, availability, security of that machine, and you realize the margins on a information business and that information business is a recurring revenue business, you fully understand why GE is deep into this. And the reason I bring this up is that will also tell you that in the sectors that they are in, they will force the hand of the industry in that sector. So, which means aviation, transportation, power, healthcare, oil and gas, right?
And all the other big multinational conglomerates, right, that are pushing it as well. So it's got that's the way I look at it too, Tim. It's got to happen because they're forcing the industry that way.
Yeah. So those industries, by virtue of their being in it so deeply, will probably move earlier because there's competitive pressure going on, right?
Okay, so I got some questions. I mean, Manjeet, the reason why I like Tim so much is that SaaS background he has. So employing service models and software, but at an enterprise level, it's kind of a Sherpa and a guide that's rare. And I should say I met Dr. Chou by reading his book. I had some people tell me, hey, read his book, it's good. And I'm developing an industrial product, an IoT product and a marketing strategy. And I put a recommendation, and then Tim saw the recommendation for the book and pinged me, and that's how we met. So, I mean, talk about hyperconnectivity in context of this conversation. Normally, I would never have the opportunity to have a dialogue with Dr. Tim Chou sitting in Minneapolis, but that happened because his ears are on. So, Tim, for me, as I'm rolling this stuff out, it's really about value at the industrial or enterprise level for me. And, can you tell, I'll name some bullet points of where I see the value, because I think we're on an evolution and a paradigm shift, as you're saying. And I have heard that GE did, another reason why they're rolling it out is they've had fantastic results when the business owners owned those programs that are now GE Digital. But trying to sell that value, to generically to the market is a tough nut to crack. So I have thought and slept and read your stuff and took the certification and love this stuff. is like the value I'm seeing is coming across in vertical AI to solve domain specific issues, business models, integration into workflow, ease of use, proprietary and normative data, reducing the friction. And this has to be communicated in a various ways of simplicity and ease of use for business models for people that want that, brass tacks for people that like communications of yesteryear, and mathematical proofs to say that we're winning by data and quantitative data. That's how I view the world. Tell me what you're seeing as the secret sauce, as an accelerator, as the differentiating portion of it.
Yeah, I think first I would tell your listeners, in the world of enterprise IoT, whatever, I would divide the world into people that make machines and people that use machines, right? So Illumina makes gene sequencers. Children's Hospital Orange County uses gene sequencers. Boeing makes airplanes. United Airlines uses them. Okay. Now, obviously, these are interrelated, but they're not the same. And I have told people I think it's better to focus on people who make machines rather than people that use machines. And I'll explain why. I was spent a little time with the guys at Samsung Smart Home half a year ago. And I told them, I said, I can tell you why smart home hasn't happened, even though we've been talking about it for nearly 20 years, right? I go, here's the problem. You walk in my house and you say, see that dishwasher, that TV, that refrigerator, that washer dryer? If you replace it all with Samsung, it's going to be really cool, right? And I go, well, wait a minute, I like my dishwasher. I just bought my flat screen, whatever. No, right? And we all know in every home, it's heterogeneous in suppliers and heterogeneous in time. My TV's older than my refrigerator. Well, by the way, walk into any hospital, any manufacturing site, right, any airline, you see the very same thing. Heterogeneous in time, meaning some equipment that's really old, and heterogeneous in supplier, meaning it's not all coming from GE or Bosch or whomever. So the challenges of managing a solution in a heterogeneous environment is much more difficult and very custom. And so if one wants to go into that market, I go, please do that. I think you should go in with a consulting model because every one of these things is going to look different. Okay? So put that off to one side, and now let's just focus on the guys that make machines, right? Make air compressors, make combine harvesters, make blood analyzers. Okay. Now, most of those guys, to be quite frank with you, they still think that what they're doing is making something which has a lot of horsepower and a lot of torque, right? It's the machine. Frankly, most of them don't realize how much software is starting to arrive inside the machine because they think of the machine as, a bunch of gears and knobs and whatever, hoses. And furthermore, they will tell you, they'll go, because I've spent time with a lot of these guys, they'll go, I'll ask them a question because remember what I just told you about GE. I say, how much of your revenue is derived from service? And they'll look at you funny, right? In fact, I spent time with one of the largest they make wire bonding machines, which are used in semiconductor manufacturing. It's about $1 billion a year business. And I was talking to the CEO. I said, how much service business do you do? He goes, well, customers don't want to pay for service.